Are you looking for a way to make co-parenting easier? Talking Parents can help you streamline your shared parenting responsibilities and minimize conflict by keeping all interactions organized and documented. With Talking Parents, you can stop worrying about the he said, she said, and focus on what matters most, your children. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store and start a 30-day free trial today. Greetings, everyone. Today we are talking about surviving legal abuse in divorce. We're looking at red flags and self-protection strategies. And as if high conflict divorce isn't challenging enough, when it escalates to legal abuse, the emotional and financial toll can be overwhelming. Today we're going to unpack a little bit about what legal abuse looks like in the context of high conflict divorce, where one party may be using the legal system to exhaust, intimidate, and financially drain you. And with me today are two very dear colleagues, Lisa Johnson and Chris Barry, co-founders of Been There, Got Out. And they just have extensive experience in this area of legal abuse. And they're going to give us both a lot of those red flags and some strategies to look at. Now, you can learn more about them in the show notes, but we're going to dive right in. And by the way, they have a gift for you that is also in the show notes, and we'll be talking about at the end of the session. Welcome, Lisa and Chris.
Thank you. It's
Thank
so
you
good
so
to be
much.
back.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm excited about today's conversation. But before we get to that, I love for my audience to get a little flavor of the human beings that I interview. And so my question for you is, can you share something unique and interesting that maybe everyone doesn't know about you, that has nothing to do with the work that you do?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. So this is, I was thinking about this, the first thing that people find out about me very early on is that I'm a crazy football fan generally, but a Miami Dolphins fan since I was a little kid. And so Lisa's not a sports fan at all, which has added an interesting dynamic to our relationship, but because she doesn't understand why I'm so nuts about it. But here's the level of my psychosis.
Yeah.
You know, on your car, on the tires, there are those little plastic caps. They're called valve stem covers that you have to take off, and you always lose when you put air in your tires.
Yes.
Mine have Miami Dolphins logos on them.
Okay. Are you originally born and raised down in Florida?
I thought you were going to ask, are you in treatment? No, I'm not from Miami. I like them from when I was very little for little kid reasons. I loved their logo and their colors, and they were on TV a lot because they were really good in the 70s. And as a kid, I loved whales and sharks and dolphins. So it was a very natural fit.
And you're not in treatment, are you?
I'm not in treatment. I should be for depression the way this season is going.
We'll save that for another conversation. And Lisa, what about you?
So I don't think people know this, but I used to be very shy as a child. I was really shy. I remember like going to a particular birthday party, I would hold my mom's leg because I was so shy. And when I got to college after graduation, a friend of mine said, "Do you want to go to Europe?" And this is the kind of part one and part two. I said yes, and we ended up going to Europe, and I backpacked for a summer. But after a few days, my friend and I realized we wanted different. We're still good friends, but we wanted different things out of the trip. So I ended up backpacking by myself through Europe for that entire summer. And then I came back to New York and worked in the city, Manhattan, for a little while, but I missed Europe so badly that I ended up moving back to Europe. And I lived in southern Hungary during the Bosnian War and was teaching English over there. And actually, my first book was about that experience, and I collected other people's experience from around the world of backpacking through Europe. And so it's titled Rite of Passage, Tales of Backpacking Around Europe. And it actually, the first printing of 10,000 sold out in 2 weeks. So that was like 21 years ago.
Wow.
I was 21 when I did it, and then it was 21 years ago that the book came out.
That is amazing. And so how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how shy do you consider yourself today?
Well, it's interesting because I'm not shy, but I remember being shy, but I think it's almost that fake it till you make it, where you just keep practicing and public speaking and having to be I was a high school English teacher, so you just learn how to deal with it.
Beautiful.
Lisa's is way more interesting than mine.
It's not a competition, Chris.
Okay, folks, let's dive in. Can you just, Lisa, pour a foundation? I know that you have such a lengthy and heartbreaking experience with legal abuse. So just a little bit of a foundation of what legal abuse is. Give us a definition, and then let's go from there. What is this experience? You had a multi-year experience of legal abuse. Can you start with that?
Yeah. First of all, legal abuse is basically, Chris and I have a legal abuse support group, and we say every week that your ex's goal is using the legal system to wear you down and bleed you dry. And we don't want that to happen. But when we talk about legal abuse, and it has several names: litigation abuse, judicial terrorism, stalking through the courts, paper abuse because of all the motions that are filed. It basically refers to when one person uses the legal system to control, harass, intimidate, coerce, and impoverish the other person. And there's two ways that it usually happens. So first is something called vexatious or frivolous litigation, where the other side will file multiple motions without merit. And so I say us, like our clients and ourselves, we are forced to constantly go to court and respond, spending lots of money and time and energy, things that take us, it ends up consuming our lives, where we're just always dealing with, and not just the actual motions, but the sense of dread of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble. Like, what's the next thing that's going to happen? Every time you open your mailbox, oh my gosh, is it something from the court? Any email from your ex or their lawyer, where you get traumatized. And then having to get into the court, go through security in the courtroom, seeing your ex in court, and I had dozens of things like that, except mine was the opposite. So that's where the other side is constantly filing motions. By the way, one of our clients just this morning, after they made a settlement, her ex is now filing a false restraining order because he's unhappy with the settlement. And it's just on and on and on. So it's like, this has already been going on for years, and there's always something new. So the other side is when you are forced to take your ex to court because they refuse to comply with an order or your agreement. So that's been my situation with a lot of things, where my lawyer called it after the year-long divorce. He said, your ex isn't going to comply. You can't afford me anymore. That was after the $100,000. And he said, you're going to have to go pro se. And I think we should start talking now about how you're going to build your case. And if you need me, I'll find a paralegal for you, but you can't, he's just decimating you. So that's been my story. And that's also the story of lots of our clients, where their ex refuses to comply, sometimes immediately after things are signed or an order is in place. And they're just constantly going back to court. And we know how much money that costs. And even if you're pro se, just the time and energy and preparation, and how it, again, consumes everything. And you feel like, when is this going to end? So that's legal abuse.
Right.
And where it stems from, Karen, if you think about the dynamics of the relationship, when you're in the relationship, for the other party in our world, the stuff we deal with, it's all about power and control, right? So when the relationship ends, when you're in the divorce process or post divorce, their need to exert power and control over you doesn't end when the relationship does, but it does narrow their avenues that they can get to you, right? Because they're not in the same house. They can't isolate you from your family anymore, but they can file stuff, and they can not pay when they're supposed to. And worst of all, so it's the courts and money. And a lot of times those are tied very closely together. And it's also the kids. And that's not what we're talking about today. But the worst part about it is a lot of times the kids are weaponized and all sorts of things around that.
Right, right. So the first question that comes to mind is, I hear in the compliance part that we're talking about post-divorce, but that first part that you talked about, the orders and orders and orders, does all of that happen during the initial divorce phase?
No. I mean, a lot of times during the initial divorce, like for me, it was trying to negotiate. We wanted to stay out of court. So we tried mediation, and that was relatively expensive, but nothing like the cost of trial. And so there, my ex and I would actually meet once every couple of weeks with a mediator. This went on for months. And we did manage to hammer out a parenting plan that was excellent, and certainly in my favor. And the way that, and this is one thing that can help people who are dealing with this sort of thing, by keeping it outside of court, you save a lot of time and money, and you also keep the power within your control as much as possible. So I wasn't able to get all the financial stuff done in mediation during the divorce process, but I did get that parenting plan, and my lawyer, who was basically a consultant in the background, which again saved tons of money, and disarmed my ex because I didn't walk into mediation with an attorney, and I was able to do that. A lot of domestic violence victims can't. But I got the parenting plan done. My lawyer said, you saved well over $10,000 with getting that. So I was like, oh. And he said, and the judge is going to be happy because when we do go to court, you can say, we already took care of this part. Now we just have this other stuff to deal with. So yeah, there's a lot that happens along the way to get orders and to get agreements, but we try to work with our clients outside of the legal system. In negotiating, we do a lot with something called strategic communication. And that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. So, and I want to get into all the strategy. I want to stay on this point though, because I think that having a really clear sense of this legal abuse. And so, if I'm understanding you correctly, that most of the legal abuse is post-divorce. Like I want for the listener, I want to be clear on how would you describe, is it across the board altogether? Like just
Yeah.
describe, because the orders, that's when you said order after order after order. And I said, okay, so is that afterwards? Is that during? Is there one more than the other? Is there something, or is it just this whole vegetable soup of you get what you get, it goes in every which direction?
Yeah, Chris, you want to talk about your...
Yeah, sure. So I'd say it's all of the above, right? Because for them, it's about power and control, as I was just saying. And I'm thinking about, in answering that question, I was reflecting on my own divorce, which took 3 years and cost $300,000 for no good reason. She just wanted to fight. We ended up settling kind of close to where we started. And it was all this unnecessary negotiation and moving goalposts and false accusation. Like it was just the full menu. And that's really where our business came from, because I had met Lisa already while I was going through this. And we had started to learn all the things. We always say all the knowledge and wisdom that we never wanted, right? We did not. I was a software sales guy. I didn't intend to do this as a career, though I do love it. But I remember having a conversation in her kitchen saying, looking back, if I knew then what I know now, I could have saved, at the time, I used to say half that time and money, but I think it would have been more like 2/3 or even more. And it's just, I didn't recognize what was going on. A lot of us going into the divorce process, it's the first time we've ever been in a courtroom, maybe for more than a traffic ticket or something, right? It's this whole thing, and it's so important and it's so foreign, and the other side is being so bizarre that it's mind-boggling. But then post-divorce, which is most of what Lisa's dealt with, I mentioned my divorce took 3 years, 10 days after the judge signed our order, after that whole process, I got served with papers this thick that she was looking to change custody from what we had negotiated over that time, and just went into effect. 10 days later, she was trying to completely turn me into an every other weekend dad. And
Right.
that was my low. If I look back, that was my low point. It was in 2017. And I was like, Lisa, oh my God, I just got this. It's all these accusations in her motion are fake. And I was beside myself. But that was also a turning point, right? Because I started to recognize what was going on. And I said, I'm not going to go put another retainer with another lawyer and all of this. I'm going to have a different approach.
Right. Right.
And also with the legal abuse, with Chris's thing is, I think the theme is dealing with someone who drags out the process. That's when legal abuse is occurring, because the longer this takes, the more time and money and everything that it costs. So often people in our space, they'll file false restraining orders, they'll make all these false allegations. And so you are trying to respond to them. So that happens during the divorce as well.
They won't comply with discovery.
Right. They don't comply with discovery. That costs so much money to chase after.
And as you're talking, I'm like, yep, I got a client who deals with that. Yet I got a client who deals with that. So let's put a laundry list together. I don't know if this is red flags, but what you're looking out for. So false accusations, let's do a subcategory. Give me 3 examples of false allegations.
like a restraining order, somebody saying this person hit me, this person sexually abused our child. Let
Person
me,
has a substance abuse issue.
yeah, there's
I,
three.
I have clients dealing with all three of those. Okay, so
Yes.
false allegations is one. What's
Mhm.
another one?
Let me think. My partner is mentally ill, and or if someone has been hospitalized, they'll say they're an unfit parent.
But
So,
that's under false allegations. So if false allegations is one
well,
of the red flags, what's another red
well,
flag?
okay, so then maybe I'm saying it wrong. So weaponizing something that happened to someone. Let's say someone has a mental health issue. The other side will spin it into that person being an unfit parent. So it's not that it's a false allegation. It's that they'll take something, they'll take a little grain of truth and they'll wrap it in layers of lies. So it's like there is something true, but then you are put in defense mode because you're like, well, yeah, I've been taking this anxiety medication, but now I feel like something's wrong with me and my ex is weaponizing it. And speaking of weaponizing, to add to this list, and this is just, I think, in general, not just with the court, but they will weaponize your career or your intelligence to make it like you're not qualified at your job. You don't know what you're doing, or else how could you have been so stupid to fall for someone like me? Like, why are you calling me an abuser if you're a therapist? If you're a therapist, then you should have known before you married me, and therefore there's nothing wrong with me, and so I'm safe to take the kids and all that.
Or at least our client who's an attorney, who is a very obviously from the day we met her, very, very capable professional. And her ex was saying, you're not a very good communicator. Like
Yeah.
her whole career is about communication.
Yeah. I think another big thing with legal abuse is a quote that we like to use from a friend of ours called Steve the Bodyguard. And that is, an abuser's greatest tool is fear. And so they will make you afraid to do anything because you'll be like, oh, if I don't listen to them, I'm going to do worse in court. I'm going to get in trouble. We're going to spend so much money. So it's this like, you already, a lot of these relationships that our clients are in, the other person, they're coercively controlled. So the other person became the authority. And during the divorce, it's like, oh, we shouldn't use an attorney because let's just figure it out ourselves, which is true. Like, that's great if it's normal, but not when you don't know your rights.
Right.
So that's another thing, like
And I'm thinking,
pushing
Lisa,
people. Go ahead, Chris.
Lisa, when we first got together as a romantic couple, Lisa's got this wonderful beach near her house, and I had not met her kids, so we were not like it was early on, so we were, just keeping it off like our own, not letting the kids know. And she has this wonderful beach, and it's got a wall there, and we would go. It was like May and June. It was beautiful weather, and we would sit on this wall, and my phone would ring, or I'd get a text message. When the boys, I have two boys, they were with my ex, and she'd say, so and so isn't feeling well, you need to bring over this medication or something like that. And
It
I
was like
jump,
you need to jump. Like it's 10:30 at night. You need to
right.
jump.
And just she had become, my ex had become aware of this relationship I had and figured I was probably with my new girlfriend. And what can I do to interfere with it? And Lisa said, after this had gone on for a while, she said, you're not emotionally available, right? So it's the impact that their behaviors, and this is not exactly the legal system, but it's the impact that the dynamics of the relationship continue to have afterwards, and the effect it could have had on my burgeoning romance with Lisa.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And I want to go back to the weaponizing for a second because I want you to talk about this, of course, crosses over into parental alienation sometimes, but can we talk a little bit about weaponizing the children
Oh,
and what that looks like?
yeah. So,
how long do we have?
I know,
Yeah.
I know that's actually what we're working on our current book about is how to handle when your ex is trying to turn the kids against you in court and in life. But what that looks like, oh, there's so much on it. I can go through some of the basic, we
Yeah,
call
just
it
a couple of top
alienation
level.
factors. Yeah. So the other side, so once the relationship ends, an abusive person wants to leave you, as we say, homeless, penniless, and childless. They don't want to take everything from you. And the child, it's like everybody has to come with me because I'm the victim and you're the villain. So the kids have to choose which one of us. And often that person has psychological issues. They tend to be more emotionally dependent on the children. Children align with certain parents for a number of reasons, but often it's which one is less likely to harm me. Like the one that's being targeted, I'm not going to stay with because then my parent, my father or mother who's doing this is going to do the same thing to me. So I'm going to align
I align with the unsafe parent because
Right.
it's not safe to align with the safe parent.
That's right.
That's very
Isn't
well.
that, yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
it is crazy. So often the
And yet
unsafe,
understandable. I'm sorry, I didn't mean
right. No, I know it's baffling. So it's called the preferred parent versus the target parent. So the preferred, the one that the child is aligning with, sometimes will send what's called poisonous messages to about the other parent to the child. We've classified them as the 3 U's, that the other parent is unsafe, unloving, and or unavailable. So they'll say things, they don't even have to say it outright, but even body language or expressions and eye rolling, because
Mhm.
we all pick up on each other's energy. So they sense that. Another is they'll block contact and communication with the child. So they won't comply with a parenting plan or even an agreement. It's like, no, I don't think that the kid should be with you. And a lot of times, unfortunately, parents have it where it's a package deal. Like, you left us instead of just you left me. So I'm going to keep the kids and you are there, and you don't deserve to have a relationship with them because of what happened between us.
Yeah.
And
I
Lisa, I'm
actually
sorry.
have,
Whoops,
Go ahead,
I'm sorry
Karen.
for interrupting, but the thing you were saying before about unsafe, unloving, and unavailable, like that messaging when I was first with Lisa, my ex would send this messaging if I didn't come to one of their little league games or something.
Mhm.
Oh, dad's just with his new girlfriend.
Or more.
Yeah, oh God, I hate that word. Um, or like trivializing my relationship with my boys. Like she would drop them off and say, enjoy your visit with your father. Like it was just a visit. Your real home's with me.
Yep.
Like it's so insidious and so subtle,
Yep.
but it plants this seed that fortunately in my case it didn't work at all.
Yeah.
But
I could tell so many stories based on what you just said. I have one client, young child, 4 years old, and the other parent, everything's about what's in the best interest of this child. That's not at all in the best interest of the child, and uses the complete inflexibility that they have, shielded with the best interest of the child. So I see that happening often. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. And so there's the heightened parental alienation, but I have, my children are now in their mid to late 20s. And my daughter had come to me and said, like maybe 5 years ago, and she was like, I am so sorry. All I heard was dad's narrative, and you were the bad guy, and I drank the Kool-Aid. And now that I'm older and I'm seeing behavior toward me that you experienced, like, and you just bit your tongue and you didn't say anything. And so I bring this up because I'm curious with the weaponizing. I'm not jumping into the sandbox. I'm not adding more burden to your shoulders. I'll just as well be love and be the bad guy until you're old enough for us to chat about it. And then we can move on. But do you have guidance for families where the children are being weaponized and what they should and shouldn't do?
Yeah, that's a huge, huge question. But what you did, Karen, I think is appropriate. I think one of the things people want to do, which doesn't work, is they want to tell the child the truth. And I'm doing air quotes in case anybody can see that. But so let's say the preferred parent, the abusive parent, will be saying terrible things, and then the child comes back, tells the target parent, this is and then the target parent wants to, that's not true, and you shouldn't believe, blah, blah, blah. The issue is that first parent is telling the child what to think. The child comes to the other parent, and then if, let's say us, we're the target parent, we're basically doing the same thing. We're saying, no, you should think this. So one saying that, and it doesn't respect the child's ability to have their own judgment and critical thinking skills. So instead of pushing back at it, which in a lot of ways is abuse by proxy, because sometimes the parent is telling the child that, knowing that they're going to come back to you to trigger you, and then reporting back about how upset you're getting. So it's like, it doesn't make any sense. It makes sense to the abusive person. But one of the best things to do for a parent is to approach it, is to sort of just listen and approach with curiosity. So as they're parroting back the stuff, to be like, oh, you sound really, there's a lot of psychological techniques. You sound really angry, whatever, like, tell me more. Tell me why I want to listen to you. I'm here for you.
Beautiful.
And the most important thing is the relationship, to keep that relationship with the child, not to correct things that can happen later, as you know.
Yes.
And interviewing, I don't know if you know Charlie McCready. He's from
Yes.
the UK.
I
Yeah.
interviewed him.
Oh, yeah, he's great. Yeah, we just met him recently and interviewed him. He talked a lot about teenagers in particular, how they don't even care. Like they don't, so like they're just off with their friends
Like,
anyway.
leave me alone.
Right.
Keep me out of
Right, like
it.
I don't care. I don't care about either of you. But that a lot of times in their 20s, when they go off to college or they get out of that house, they can start, things
Yes.
settle down and they start realizing. We had a beautiful story from one of our clients just this past weekend. She has a son and a daughter, and her ex was really in the kids' heads about how terrible she was. And she was, we have the hashtag from puddle to ninja. So she was a puddle for a while. She was like a mess and very, very emotional. And so we did a lot with trying to keep herself regulated. Anyway, her daughter, who is a teenager now, so still fairly young in the process, she said the other day she hugged me for the first time in years, and they were passing each other on the steps, and she looked at the mother and said, Mom, I've been so mean to you. I'm so sorry. And of course, we were all like crying, because knowing her for these past couple of
Oh,
years and this being her biggest concern. And she said, and now, like, we hug often. And I was like, that is so much progress. So she was able to keep that relationship despite the adolescent, and this kid is still like a teenager. But that's amazing. And I think when something like that happens, people get so scared and they feel like it's happening, like my ex is saying all these things and I can't make it stop, and now my relationship is doomed. That's not true. A lot of it depends on how you yourself respond to it. But that's a huge other
I was
topic.
just going to say, and we're getting away from the legal. So,
Yeah.
so to the listener, I apologize, but I had to at least touch on this.
But
I want to,
it is a big part of legal abuse.
well, and
It is,
so that's what I
yeah.
want you to now comment on, what piece of it. So I know I have parents who sometimes want to go back to court when I know the court's not going to do diddly for them. But then there's other times where you have to go back to court. So when we look at weaponizing the children from a legal abuse perspective, what would you highlight? What's the situation or scenarios where it is legal abuse because you have to involve the court?
Yeah.
Well, one that's very thorny and difficult is when maybe the kids are a little bit older and they're not complying with the schedule, the access schedule, right? So Timmy isn't coming over for his visit because I'm doing the air quotes also, doesn't want to be with you, or I can't get him in the car, he won't come, and thinking that's some kind of valid excuse for not following a visitation schedule.
Yeah.
So sometimes I had a situation in that category, and I chose not to go the legal route, but that I could have. That was really the only I had available to me to force a solution. I just instead used patience and messaging to my son and
Yeah.
all that, and the problem was solved, I think, way, way better than if a court had gotten involved.
Yeah.
But
I had gone to my attorney once when things were pretty bad. I think my son was a teenager. And I was given and I was not the person who would go back to court. I really didn't want to go back to court. I'd always ask myself, how important is it? Anyway, I thought this was pretty important. And I went to my attorney and I went to my son's therapist. And the advice I got ended up being brilliant because they basically both said to me, because while he's suffering so much from dad, because he's also aligned with dad, if you step between him and dad, you're going to be the bad guy. And so your child needs to come to you requesting that help, because anything shy of that, you're giving the difficult parent ammunition, because the child's going to be like, don't you take my other parent away from me. And so I pivoted, like you, Chris, to patience and messaging and really helping my son when he struggled. I remember one point saying to him, if the lion's cage is open and you step into the lion's cage over and over again, you can expect to be bitten. And like giving him responsibility for, you have to determine how you want to handle this. I'm here, I'll support you, I love you, but you have to look at your behavior, because you keep walking back into that lion's cage and getting bit. And so I think it gets very complex. Again, it's a very slippery slope for me to not go on. So I'm going to pivot our conversation a little bit. So we talked about false allegations, weaponizing the truth, the career, weaponizing the kids, fear, which is like terrorists use fear, right? And so you're saying this is the same thing, that they use fear. Is there anything else on that red flag, like top level strategies that they use before we pivot?
Strategies that they use?
Like the false allegations, like the weaponizing, like the fear.
Yeah, I think we've covered most of, I'm thinking in my head of our like indicators of people who do these kinds of things.
Yeah. And we're going to get to that in a
Yeah.
minute. So we're going to take a short break. And when we get back, we're going to talk about what is that personality that does these things. And then what strategies do Lisa and Chris have to share with you guys to either avoid or actually be able to process through this. Your kids may not be the only ones taking tests this year. SoberLink is the #1 alcohol monitoring device on the market for parents who need to prove their sobriety. Here's how it works. Your co-parent will test at scheduled times each day. Built-in facial recognition confirms their identity. Tamper sensors flag any attempts to cheat. And results get sent instantly to your phone. So you know your kids are with a sober parent, whether it's during school nights or weekends away. Set your family up for success this school year. Visit soberlink.com/JBD to learn more and get $50 off your device. Divorce feels like an overwhelming perfect storm as you navigate pain, fear, and confusion while struggling with unfamiliar legal procedures and the pressure to make complex decisions that will impact the rest of your life. Our free Rapid Relief Call provides the clarity and confidence you're yearning for. Visit rapidreliefcall.com for support and guidance today. Are you looking for a way to make co-parenting easier? Talking Parents can help you streamline your shared parenting responsibilities and minimize conflict by keeping all interactions organized and documented. With Talking Parents, you can stop worrying about the he said, she said, and focus on what matters most, your children. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store and start a 30-day free trial today. Okay, so we're back, and let's talk about that personality type. Like, what would our listener be looking for, or who's the typical personality type that engages in this type of abuse?
The type of person, just off the top of my head, who does this kind of thing usually has some kind of personality disorder, or they're an addict. And addicts and people with mental health issues, significant mental health issues, they don't have good judgment, unfortunately, because they're addicted or they've got other things that they're dealing with. And so you can't negotiate, you can't figure out things rationally. So they tend to be very focused on themselves. And they also have very short term, like they don't think about consequences. Everything is very short term, problems with impulse control. And it makes it very, very difficult. Chris and I often talk about how with negotiation, that our clients are part of my lawyer says this is the craziest case I've ever had, because when they're going to negotiation, the lawyer is like, okay, we're going to do what's fair. Like, we're all going to do what's fair, and we're all going to do what's best for the kids. But our client's ex is like, no, I don't care about that. I care about what's for me. It's all about me.
Right.
And so we have to approach these cases very, very differently.
Right.
Because they're thinking about themselves. An addict is like, I need my fix, and someone with a personality disorder has all kinds, depending what it is, has all kinds of other issues, but they're very focused on themselves.
And would you agree that, so I'm writing a couple of things, so their judgment, right, their discernment or judgment is off. They tend not to have a whole lot of empathy too, isn't that?
Yeah.
I've yet to see anyone that has any empathy. They can fake empathy, right?
Right.
They can fake it because they can absorb. They're very chameleon-like quite often, and they'll have a sense of what they should look like to get what they want, so they can act. like it's empathy, but it's not real. Their only loyalty is to the
And I think that if you're divorcing this personality, you're nodding your head and going, yeah, they haven't been empathetic in years, like no matter what I do. So the other thoughts that came to mind is they're very polarized, black and white. Like
black and white thinking.
there is no gray that they live in, right? And so you're either bad or you're good or whatever the case may be, you're typically bad. And then the other one that comes to mind for me is, and I don't know if this is true, so I'm curious what you think, catastrophic thinking or believing.
That's an interesting one.
Extremes. I have to process that one a little bit, but certainly thinking in extremes, which ties to the black and white thinking.
Yeah, the
You're
extremes
either
is very
all
black
good.
and white. Yeah.
Yeah, you're either all good or you're all bad, and you're all good in the beginning when they're pulling you in and the whole frog in the pot thing. And over years later, you're like, it's all bad. When did it get all bad? I remember the sense when my relationship ended with my ex of like, why could we never get back to the good old days? Air quotes again, the good old days. And then over time, I realized the good old days, like there were trouble signs right from the beginning. The good old days weren't that good. It was interesting. It was, what's the word, like exciting. Like there was a lot of drama, some of the drama good, right? It was exciting. It was a very exciting relationship,
Yeah.
but it wasn't all that good. It was never healthy. But I
Right.
just didn't recognize it because I was so enamored with this. Wow, this is exciting. And somebody who's telling me that I'm so special and on a pedestal and all that.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of character traits here. I think that uncompromising and flexible, their way or the highway, kind of uncompromising.
Yep.
So let's get down to brass tacks here. I think that everyone who's listening is feeling a little bit like me, like a bobblehead, where just nodding up and down, nodding up and down. It's like, yep, 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 yep. What the heck do we do? So, how do you start people? Can you leave our audience with a couple of scenarios? And in this case, this is a good approach. And then, like, can you give us something tangible for those who are in the courts, running out of money, running out of energy, running out of hope, and really yearning for some guidance?
Okay. Chris, go ahead.
So, well, yeah, we were just talking about this the other day. I don't know if this is like Lisa and I, one of our core values is we want to provide practical, actionable advice to our clients. And we'd like to bring the same to the show. I don't know if this first one falls into that category, but we were just talking the other day about the word yet, right? 3-letter word, yet. So Lisa got this, right? This is from your daughter's therapist. I'm looking for Lisa to nod. Yes, I remember in the story, who taught her this mindset that Lisa was so frustrated. The judge doesn't hear me. I keep going back and there's been 10 appearances and he still won't provide. And she's going crazy and overwhelmed, as you said earlier. That's the word we hear more than any other. And this therapist taught Lisa to think the judge hasn't heard me yet. Because we always tell our people, our clients, they don't fail. And the people in our community, they don't fail. They don't lose. They just give up too soon because they get worn down by the process, right? When you leave one of these relationships, your door prize, I mean, you get out of it, that's great. But your door prize is you get your own personal terrorist. Yeah. And it can take time. And without the proper support, without knowing what's going on, it's very easy to get fatigued. Chris, and give up before you finally prevail. Not that everybody's going to prevail, but you can usually, the most of the times that people don't, it's because they give up before they got to the finish line.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's a perfect, and it is actionable. It may be more of a mindset actionable than a, excuse me, doing, but the way I say it, and I love yours is much more succinct. I'll have clients who complain about what hasn't happened, and I'm always like, the fat lady hasn't sung yet.
Exactly.
You haven't crossed the finish line yet. And now you're putting out to the world this negative thing that they're not hearing me, they're not seeing me, it's not going to work. We're not there yet. And so yet is so perfect. It's like, not yet. I love that. It's so simple. And I would say to everybody listening, if this resonates with you, print it out in some funky font, put it on your computer, put it on your refrigerator, put it on your bathroom mirror. Just not yet. Just not yet. The kids don't need to know what it is. That is such a great message to hold on to hope, because if you're discouraged halfway through, the fat lady hasn't sung yet, you haven't gotten to the end, you don't know that's true, and you do not want to be pouring that negative perspective into what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah. The other thing is that you don't ever want to approach settlement from a point of desperation. People often feel like, I will do anything to make this end. I'm tired. Just yesterday, we met with someone who is exhausted, has spent over 200,000. They're still in the beginning of the divorce, it sounds, and was like, I've been offering the other side everything because I just want this to end. We're like, it's not going to happen.
His attorney said that if he agrees to this settlement, he needs to sign a declaration that his attorney didn't advise him against it because it was so lopsided.
Yeah.
But he's like, I just want to get it done. I think of people who say, I'll give on the money, I just want the custody. Like, I want the kids. And then they negotiate that settlement. And guess what happens 2 years later? Their ex brings them back to court and says, I want 50-50 custody.
Yeah. And you're not getting more
given
child
all
support.
the money away,
Right.
and
I
now
got all the money. And then 2 years later, I'll get the 50-50 that you didn't want, which is why you gave up on some of the
I have a client I'm working with right now who we just had that conversation. So that's such an important one. So how do you avoid the desperation?
Okay, so that's I was going to say that I think when I say negotiation, I don't mean just mediation in general, because negotiation is a part of life and you're always negotiating with your ex over so many things. Is to realize that when you are in a formal mediation, you're the reasonable one, and experts will see that, and they will push you because they'll be like, the other one won't budge, so they're going to push you more. To realize that from the beginning, and to know your rights, and to be very prepared before going into any kind of formal mediation, but also just in general to be like, I need to be clear on what I'm not willing to do and what I'm willing to do, and to not let myself always be pushed because I want to appear so cooperative. Like, yes, you want to appear cooperative, but not from that point of desperation. I cannot count how many people we've met who have said, I signed this thing, my lawyer forced me to sign it because because they made me feel like if I didn't, then I would do worse, whatever it was. And they didn't quite understand their rights. So I think it's so important to meet with experts like you or like us who can really clarify things. We often say that we kind of fill the gaps of what attorneys aren't really trained to do, and therapists don't quite understand when it comes to the family court stuff.
Yeah.
And I think just having someone who can explain things, and we're all New Yorkers here, so we call it the harsh New York reality check. Like, no, this stuff actually doesn't matter, but this really does. To stay on top of things, we call this taking strategic oversight. Like, you shouldn't repeat that same toxic cycle from your relationship where you get out and now you're like, now I'm going to pay an attorney $20,000 retainer and they're just going to deal with it for me. You need to step up and be like, I need to know what my motion means.
Yep.
I need to read every agreement, because mistakes are very expensive and nobody's perfect, and lawyers are wonderful people, but a lot of them, they have many cases, they get sloppy. And
we were
our
talking
lives.
Yeah, we were talking about getting fatigued before from our standpoint. And Lisa mentioned that our clients say, my attorney said this is the craziest case they've ever had. Well, the attorneys get fatigued also.
Right.
And because these cases are crazy.
Right.
And the attorneys will start to push you or our client, whoever we're talking about, to settle. Like, I can't deal with, they won't say I can't deal with this anymore, but they'll be like, oh, just settle, just stop pushing.
Yeah, it's gone on so
And
long.
so our client is getting it from every side, right? They're getting it from their own attorney who's supposed to be their advocate.
Right.
So it's especially important to really be in charge. You're the client. You're in charge. It doesn't mean to argue with your attorney about every little thing, but you do need to live with the results afterwards.
And I think that you need to, I'm always telling my clients, you are the CEO of your divorce. You're signing the check, you're paying the bill. And so you need to ask those questions. And I think one of the key things that people like you and me and my team do is we can take the time to really understand what is the fear underneath that. You're not hearing some basic logistical stuff. So let's figure out like what is it that is in the way. And so an attorney, on the other hand, that this is their 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, whatever it is. And so they'll be like, yeah, there's a preliminary conference coming up, or there's an order that's in there, blah, 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 and this is going to happen. And there's not the time and attention to really help that client get crystal clear, ask questions without feeling shameful at anything, and truly be able to come alongside the attorney and partner with them. And so I know a lot of times your clients don't have attorneys. My clients typically do, and they still need that extra communication, hand-holding, explanation. And there is no stupid question, and every fear is a reasonable fear, but it could not be serving you. So let's figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about someone that we just met yesterday who it was an initial call, and she was talking about how they had a settlement agreement, but then she found out all these terrible things that her husband did behind her back. And so she's like, now I don't want to settle because I want to punish him. And so she goes, and my lawyer's not listening to me. And I thought, here's where it's so important when you're in one of these situations to have the team of support. And Chris and I talk about the table, where you're the surface of the table and it's these different legs to help get you through it, because this is not easy. There's a lot of grief involved. It is like a death in a lot of ways. And people often rely on their attorney for everything, because the attorney is often the first person to hear the story, or they know the intimate details, but attorneys are not trained to be your therapist most of the time. There's a couple of unicorns that have psychology backgrounds, but they're very expensive. So your lawyer's job is to be your ally and your advocate, to communicate well and translate the case into the law. Then some of our clients have friends and family, another leg of support, but many of them have been isolated. Some of in our community, many of them actually, their ex has aligned with their family against them because they come from these toxic families of origins.
Yep.
But even if they do have close friends and family, will sometimes become what Bill Eddy calls negative advocates. Like, you're right to be so angry, and the judge should do it. And it gets you, like, it contributes to the conflict, which bleeds onto the kids, which of course isn't good. And then sometimes they say things like, well, why'd you stay so long? Just to make you feel bad and not meaning to. And then another leg is the therapist, and certainly they're there to help you heal, but they don't understand the trauma of dealing with family court, and also giving bad advice sometimes, which ends up blowing up. And people are like, but my therapist, it's like, your therapist shouldn't be giving you legal advice or strategic advice. And then last are coaches, like all of us, where it's like, we fill that gap. Chris and I certainly understand extensive information about family court and how it works and what you need to do and all of that, but also having that certification domestic violence advocate. I'm a trained crisis counselor too. Like, people in these situations, they need people with emotional intelligence. It's not just like, let's just hurry up and get done with it. They're grieving.
Yeah.
It takes a lot. So I think it's so important for people going through this to know you need a team of people. Yeah. You cannot do this by yourself. It is not free, unfortunately.
Yeah. 1,000%. And investing in the team is an investment, not a spending.
And not just in investing in you getting through it. This is your children, because the way that you are during this time affects your children, and the more self-regulated you can be and having that support, the better it's going to be for your kids, because your kids aren't going to be forced to take care of you, which is what happens in cases where people don't have support. The kids feel responsible.
Oh my God.
And that affects all their future relationships and intergenerational trauma. So like, it is a small investment to take care of things now than to deal with everyone else's like future being ruined.
Absolutely. And the breaking of generational chains is something that's so near and dear to my heart too. And it's like, if you don't become the healthiest, most aware version of yourself, then it just perpetuates. And if we're going to go through all this pain and struggle, let's use it also to break those generational chains.
I remember a client saying to us one time on a call, she said, it stops with me.
Love that. Exactly. That's beautifully said. So we talked about using the not yet to avoid desperation. Let's give our folks one more strategy, and then I'd love for you to share your free gift and how people can find you.
Okay. So let's see. One more strategy. I'm thinking you need to understand that we talk about the client as consumer. That's like a series that we've done. Like, you're the one in charge and you're the one paying the bills. So you need to remember that. So when people start telling you all these things that you need to do without an explanation that you understand and that you've chosen is the right path to take, you shouldn't just go along because somebody says, oh, you both need psych evaluations, and there goes $15,000 that doesn't get anyone anywhere. Like really understanding the choices that are being made and knowing that overall it's your life and your kids that are going to be affected the most. So you need to be aware of what's going on. You can't just be carried by the current and then later feel all this regret. And that's why education is so important. I have a button from when I was a high school English teacher that says, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
You know what? I want to piggyback on that one with something that is a little more simplistic, and this is not the free gift, by the way, but about educating yourself. We see a lot of people in our space who engage in doom scrolling. There's a lot of negative stuff out there. Oh my God, the family court is corrupt. The judge is biased, both ways, whether it's men, women, or whatever factor. And it's very easy to get caught up in complaining about the system. The system's broken, the system, the system, the system. Well, Lisa and I are well aware that the system is not ideal and is not built to handle these kinds of cases, right? Judges and that whole ecosystem, they don't have the sophistication to understand what's going on. But knowing that, you need to work within that system. That's the system we got, right? I'm all for advocacy and change and educating judges and all kinds of stuff. That's great, but not when you're in it, right? When you're in it, focus on your case. The best thing you can do to change the system is win your case.
Yeah.
So avoid the doom scrolling. That's something we say a
Yeah,
lot.
great tip.
Yeah, I love that. I think we could probably do this for another hour or two and not even scratch the surface. But this has been so great to get some really good red flags, some sense of what that personality is, and a couple of strategies. I know you guys have a free gift for our listeners. Can you share that?
So Chris, you made the free gift. It was like tips
Is it
on
the
legal
checklist?
abuse. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Talk
You know,
about that.
I was not, just in all candor to everybody listening. Lisa set this interview up, and I'm just like, I just showed up today.
So I
And I
have
made a
here
little
that it's
note.
a legal abuse tips
Yeah.
worksheet. Is that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I made a little note during this when you were talking about the free gift, not knowing what you had talked about. And I said, that would be perfect for this. So I wrote it down. So we're all on the same page.
So what is
so
it?
Chris, talk about it. What is
So
it?
I think it's, Lisa, it's 17. And I started off saying, well, it should be 10 or it should be 5 or whatever tips. And I said, why don't we just brainstorm the tips and make the list? And the number is what it is. So it's 17 tips about legal abuse and what you can do about it. And we have it as a downloadable PDF, and we're happy to send it to anybody. I'm sure you'll put
It's in the show notes. And
Absolutely.
and this will be in the show notes as well, but just say it out loud, where you guys have a great podcast, you have a website. Where can our listeners find you and follow you?
We're everywhere. It's very easy to find us. So we're been there, got out.com is our website. So it's like been there, done that, but been there, got out. Our home base on social media is Instagram. Lisa does an amazing job connecting with her audience there. And that's the home base for most of our long form interviews that she does live. And then we put them out on our YouTube channel. So it's at Been There, Got Out. Our podcast, if you search for Been There, Got Out, you'll find it. So we're
Don't
super.
this
Our book.
book from last year. Yeah. So it's called
Available on
Toxic.
Amazon.
Yep, been there, got out, toxic relationships, high conflict divorce, and how to stay sane under insane circumstances. And like I alluded to earlier, now we're working on another, which has to do with how to handle when your ex is turning the kids against you. And we're building this huge online course that has like 7 different sections of things we teach: strategic communications, taking strategic oversight, presentation, targeted documentation, pro se. There's a section on alienation, mediation, negotiation. I forgot one of them, but that kind of stuff. So that we're working on, and that's coming out in the next several months, bit by bit.
Beautiful. So lots of places where you can connect with them. Go check them out. Check out the podcast since you're podcasters, and definitely download that tip sheet. Chris and Lisa, thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom and your guidance with the audience. I I would venture to say the vast majority of our listeners are going to benefit from this conversation.
Thank you so much, Karen. We look forward to hosting you.
Yes, I'm going to be on the Been There, Got Out podcast, so we'll be letting you guys know about that as well. And until next time, you take care.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thanks for joining us on the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast. I hope you found guidance and encouragement to help you along your journey. If you like my podcast, please take a minute to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. You can also visit us at jbddivorcesupport.com, where our team of coaches support both men and women through our one-on-one coaching, group programs, online courses, and free resources. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll talk to you soon.